I'll move around a lot.
Hello and welcome to the Be Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast, where we are reshaping life, leadership, and business. And today I'm welcoming to the show Barry Lynch, all the way from Christchurch. I went to call you Barry Ηezo.
Yeah, you can call me that. It's like, what's that guy who changed his name to Mr. Rocket?
Totally. I don't know. Like you are interconnected to your business. You are your business. You are your brand. We'll talk about that shortly. How is your Tuesday going, Barry, in Christchurch?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been good. It's been busy for ever. Yeah, we just you keep eking her out each day and just keep going. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's been busy.
Yeah, I agree. You do keep going. And for all the listeners out there, hello on a Tuesday here. Can you notice Barry's accent? He is originally from Ireland, but he has been living in Christchurch for the last 14 or 15 years, you said. You are the proud father of two boys. They have Kiwi accents. They are 16 and 12 years of age. We'll come back to the boys and, kind of the next generation of leaders. I always am, really curious, especially from a parent's perspective on what they see. Let's get on into it though. I have been really looking forward to this conversation because there's one thing about the Irish that I love. You just call a spade a spade. Well, that's what I personally think. You ask me. There's no bullshit, right? You just say it how it is. It's good to have that, kind of,
We
you
don't
know,
have time. We don't have time. It's just you get straight to the point.
yeah, and I love it because I'm a straight to the point kind of a girl as well, or woman, I should say. And so I do love that there's just saying it how it is. And yeah, so let's get into it because I feel like you're going to give us a really fresh perspective in terms of what it is to be building and scaling a business. So let's start. You're the co-founder and CEO of ηezo. That is not your surname. You spent almost 25 years inside the realities of construction, cost management, and large-scale project delivery before stepping into startup life and rebuilding from the ground up. So as the co-founder and CEO of ηezo, you and your team, Barry, you help architects and engineers design lower carbon buildings with greater visibility into cost, carbon, and material impact from the earliest stages of a project. The platform is designed to reduce workflow friction, simplify decision making, and help teams avoid the expensive redesign loops that often emerge later in the process. Oh my gosh, that redesign, it's such a fun one, isn't it? And I love the way it's, the redesign loops. Your work reflects a practical belief that sustainability only becomes meaningful when it can exist alongside the commercial reality. And it is so true. Not as a compromise, as part of a better decision making from the beginning. And so, what sits underneath your journey, Barry, from what I understand and from the homework I've been doing, is there's a deeper shift, and that's moving from the certainty of consultancy and established expertise into the unpredictability of startup life, where leadership becomes less about control and more about learning through uncertainty in real time. And I kind of think about it like being adaptive, being fluid. You can't control everything. No day is the same when it comes to startup. You said you've been busy forever. When you booked in for the pod, I love this. This comes back to the just say it how it is. And I asked you what's one unique insight or lived experience when it comes to life, leadership, and or business. You said, I spent 20 years in consultancy and 10 building my own, and then decided stability was overrated. Sold it all, jumped into a software startup, going from I know exactly what I'm doing to shit, I hope this works. Employees became business partners and I had to relearn what lean actually means. It's quite a great story in terms of how that happened when you told me the other week. You can start wherever you like. I'm handing it over to you. Thank you.
I guess uncertainty kind of has shaped my entire career, even though it's been a long one in one industry. It didn't really start out as a clear pathway for me. I grew up in a household that had a workshop on the side and a family business that was building joinery. So bar fronts, fitted kitchens, wardrobes, stuff like that. And I went right through high school thinking that's what I'm going to do. My father's business, I'll jump in there because every weekend, every bank holiday, every summer holiday was spent in the workshop or out on building sites fitting these things. So I always thought this is what I'm going to do. I had an older brother who had no interest whatsoever in doing it, so it kind of always fell to me anyway, and I enjoyed doing it, and fully expected that that's what my career was going to be. And I got to my last year of high school and my father turned to me and he said, so what are you doing when you leave high school? Fully thinking he was going to go, next month you'll come and join me, or in 6 months time you'll come and join me. But when I suggested that, he said, no, this is my business. You don't just get my business. Well, you go find your own thing. You're not doing this anymore. And that came as a shock. I was like, balls, what am I meant to do now? So, yeah, just uncertainty. It started with uncertainty. And I was like, right, well, what do I know? I know I've been on construction sites, so I'll try and find a career in that. I ended up going off to college and doing quantity surveying. So cost management within construction, and went into that as a career and never looked back at joinery, to be honest. It was quantity surveying for the next 20 odd years after that. Around 2008, we had the GFC, the global financial crisis, and Ireland had been at boom times for about 10, 12 years, and it suddenly collapsed overnight to about 60% unemployment in construction, and uncertainty kind of hit again after 9, 10 years in the industry. And I was like, oh shit, right, okay, what do I do now? So I started looking at a career change, very quickly realized I can't do anything else. I'm so embedded in this, and my knowledge is so embedded in it. And I ended up looking at where else I could go and do the same thing. So at the time, there was two options: Canada and New Zealand. New Zealand, Christchurch in particular, had just had its earthquakes. Canada.
Yeah, there you go. Because I was wondering why Christchurch of all places. Like, no disrespect to Christchurch. Anyone listening from Christchurch? Yeah.
Yeah, it was two regions in the world were booming at the time. Canada's oil and gas industry, which was crying out for my kind of profession, and Christchurch, New Zealand, which was again crying out for. The decision was made because my brother was actually already living in Wellington, and I had one very young child, and I was like, right, okay, let's go to where at least we've got family close by, somewhat close by. So that's how we ended up in New Zealand, and uncertainty continued to reign because very first job I went into, they said, you're Irish, you'll know about heritage, so we'll put you on all of the heritage buildings that need to be repaired. And I was seconded into Christchurch City Council here into a program that they were doing to strengthen and repair heritage buildings. I'd never worked on a heritage building in my life, so again, I was expected to sink or swim and try and find a solution. But you know, you got all the basics are still all the same. So that was fun. Spent about 2 or 3 years there, where I got up to kind of a senior level within that company and became a shareholder, and got very quickly annoyed because I wasn't making the decisions, or I wasn't able to make the decisions I wanted to. Somebody else was making them, and I was just informed. So I decided, right, you know what, I'll go and start my own business.
Yeah. Because as a shareholder, when you don't have any say, it's pretty shit, isn't it? Like, it's just like,
It was kind of informal. It was like, you know, like there was the main directors there that were making the decisions, and you know, you kind of found out about them afterwards, you know. And I was like, right, okay. And even just the way the direction the business was taking, it was like, I'm sure there's got to be, you know, I've got some ideas on where this needs to go, you know, or in order to create business. And it was coming towards the end of the earthquake, kind of the business as usual earthquake stuff, you know, and it was kind of turning into rats and mice, not for the biggest projects, but on the kind of mid-tier projects. So I kind of went, right, okay, well, this is a good opportunity to go in, start a business and actually try and build something myself. And that's what I did. And a little bit of uncertainty, but I kind of knew what I was doing around just, you know, having been at senior level for a while. So yeah, started that business, and but it was there was no real. I knew what I was doing because it was the existing profession that I'd always been doing. It was then that I came across, and this is a bit of a meandering story, not really to the point of the question you probably had.
stuff down though, because like you're talking about uncertainty and like another uncertain moment. What's really interesting for me though is it's very non-linear,
Yeah.
and yet there's a linear piece to it all, which is that you've always known intrinsically what you wanted to do. Like, I mean, from the moment you know, obviously with the conversation with your dad,
Mm.
said, this is what I'm good at and this is what I'm going to, like, you've almost like, you know, if you think about construction and mastery and it's a craft and you've just continued to master something that you knew you were good at. And so
Mm.
you've hit almost like, it feels like to me, you've
Yeah.
hit
That's been
mastery.
the common theme. You know, everything I've done from the age of about 12 years old has some way involved construction. You know, so
Yeah.
it's been the common theme. I've jumped from being on the tools very early on to behind a computer for the rest of my career. But
Yeah.
and yeah, it was that last job or that last consultancy that I started. We'd grown that relatively big, and it was kind of you know, a lot of people say, you know, you've got to be in the right place at the right time. I'd kind of add to that with the right people. You know, and that's how ηezo was started, was because the right people came into my consultancy, and we had the right opportunities appear all at the same time. You know, he initially it was about 2017, I think, I employed another quantity surveyor into my business.
Great story.
What's that?
That's a great story. Sorry. I know this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Um, and he's now my CEO, or he's the CEO of ηezo, not my CEO. And instantly, you realised there was something a bit different about this guy. Owen McLaughlin, his name, another Irish guy. Kind of Irish tend to attract each other, especially in business. So yeah, he came in, and even though he was relatively junior in what he was doing, he was within the business for about a wet week when he turned around to me and he basically said, the software that we're using is shit. And I went, yeah, but I've got 14 years, 15 years on you, and I can guarantee you there's nothing better out there. And he said, look, can I try? Can I have a look anyway? And I said, yeah, sure. Look, just, take a couple hours here and there and do a bit of research. He came back to me about a month later and he said, no, you're right, there is nothing better. But he said, I have an idea. And I said, okay. And he goes, but it involves us buying design software and learning how to actually use it. So I kind of took a leap of faith with him and I said, right, well, look, yeah, go for it. So we bought the cheapest software we could, or the most cost effective, I should say, because it's actually quite good. It's not cheap. We bought a SketchUp, which is one of the three big ones that's used in the industry. His idea was, let's change quantity surveying. Let's change the way buildings are priced. Up until that point, effectively, it was all spreadsheets, glorified spreadsheets that were connected to drawings, and you were effectively still measuring every single element of the building, And his idea was basically, let's see if we could be more like designers and actually take a model from a designer and embed it with data rather than measuring. So allow it to quantify directly from their model and then link it to data sets. So in this instance, when we began, it was cost data sets. And he actually he self-taught himself how to use that software and then figured out how to embed data into those models. Very simple models to begin with, but he figured out how to do it. And he created like an efficiency for our practice within a couple of months that we were able to do, very basic measurement of models and automate the pricing of those models. And he started seeing, right, well, how much further can we go with this? Can we go beyond what would be the structural frame of the building? Can we start looking at all the architectural finishes? Can we start building it out more and more and more? And he did. He just kept building it out more and more and more. And then he started teaching more people within the practice how to do what he was doing. And effectively, we got to the point where we were more proficient than your average QS, more efficient than your average QS or quantity surveyor at pricing buildings. But then he came across a trick or a little bit of an advantage. He began to realize that actually, without redrawing the buildings, you could actually just change the data sets. So whilst the architect might have drawn that it was a certain type of external cladding on the building, Owen was like, without redrawing it all, I can actually just embed alternative data sets into that, and we can actually see what it would cost if it looked like something else without actually changing the design.
Wow. Yeah.
It was insight driven. It would give you, like what would normally take a quantity surveyor, or you'd go into a meeting and somebody would raise the question and it would be asked, you'd walk away and you walk away from that meeting, you do the analysis, and you might go back to them a week or two later with an answer to what would the alternative look like. We could do that instantly. We could walk into a meeting with our model and actually have the answer within the meeting, within seconds of being asked it. So it was creating all these efficiencies, and what we started doing was just manipulating the models to see what alternative materials, how they would impact the building's performance from a cost perspective. And we were thinking, this is fantastic. This is a great, just a point of difference for our practice.
Yeah, business model. Yeah.
Yep. And we got noticed, and to go back, Owen was the right person at the right time. And then we got the right project. We had a government organisation saw what we were doing, and they said, we're trying to prove that this particular type of primary industry is actually viable as an alternative to what is traditionally steel and concrete. They were looking at mass timber projects, so cross-laminated timber, LVL, big plywood effectively. And they said to us, listen, look, we've got all these designs that are designed in mass timber with about 15 developers around New Zealand. And the biggest problem we have is proving how they will compare to a traditional building, because we haven't designed them traditionally. Can you guys, with your consultancy, work with the architects and engineers and very quickly turn them back into steel and concrete buildings and see how they'd perform from a cost perspective? And then we've got case studies that show, here's what the actual mass timber built, here's what it would have cost if it had been built traditionally, And again, this is more of the right place with the right people. They asked us one day back around 2019, there's this carbon legislation coming out.
Yes.
And we're in the future, quantity surveyors are going to be asked to measure how much carbon is in a building. And can you guys do that? And very honestly, we weren't sustainability driven. We had no idea what we were doing other than what most people think of sustainability as solar panels. We knew how to price solar panels. And we said, so they said, can you measure carbon? And then we went, what's that? So we had a very quick learning curve where that government organisation basically gave us access to another government organisation that were building out methodologies that was going to inform and have a framework for legislation that New Zealand government was going to release that was going to mandate the measurement of carbon and then start creating thresholds to try and push down how much carbon emissions our buildings and our infrastructure were creating. We've quickly realised actually the cost data is exactly like the carbon data, almost identical.
Wow.
It comes from a different source, but it's directly linked to what material you're choosing and how much you have of it.
Yeah, okay.
So we started saying, right, well, we're already putting the cost data into these models. Let's put the carbon data in as well. And again, more of the right person in the right room. We were sitting with a structural engineer who said to us, can you do building weights? Can you do material weights? Because if you give us early design stage feedback on building weights, that gives us a lot more ammunition to aim for around reduction of other elements of the building if we know how much the structure is actually weighing very early on. Yeah.
Right,
So we started adding in the weight data. So now we had weight in our analysis, we had carbon in our analysis, we had cost in our analysis. And we started seeing these projects come across our table where, because we were rapidly able to analyze this, it would take weeks or even months for anybody else to do it. We were seeing that actually, when we swapped in and out materials without being asked, we were actually seeing that there was huge opportunities being missed to decarbonize our buildings. And as a consequence, it was with some of the materials we were choosing, it was reducing the weights of those builds, which were having knock-on effects on foundation sizes and ground remediation impacts and even building heights, the possibility of building higher. And we were like, well, all these things have knock-on effects that are normally intangible that you can't see, that nobody picks up because the industry doesn't work like that. The way the industry works is we have a design brief. We've been told how the building is meant to perform. Let's design it like we've built the last 15, 20 buildings. They're structure, steel and concrete. And they've got a finish that we've used before. So we know how all these things perform.
Yeah.
And it's the quickest way for these designers to build because they are to design, because they don't have to test the alternatives in any great depth unless they're pushed to do it.
Sorry to interrupt you. That's for me the linear versus non-linear way, right? Like in terms of just follow the way you've always done it, A to B, and then non-linear is exactly what you're doing.
Our industry is perfectly set up to follow that pattern.
Yeah.
And this is what we talk about. Bad data, we see time and bad data as being the problem for architects and engineers when they're designing buildings. They don't have access to data, or it comes too late.
It's time. And
they don't have the time to go do research at the volume that they need to do, testing alternative materials. And a great example of it is, the way the industry works is if you're a developer and you want to design or you want to build a 5-story apartment block, you'll go to an architect, you might go to a quantity surveyor and you'll say, it's a 5-story apartment block. It's got to have 20 apartments in it. Come up with a design brief. The architect comes up with a design brief. They give it to the quantity surveyor and the quantity surveyor says, look, based on the last 20 projects for that design brief that were built anywhere in New Zealand or Australia, it should cost this much per square metre. And your building needs to be this many square meters in order to have 20 apartments. So now they're multiplying the cost per square meter of an old project against the square meters that your building has for what would be a similar building use. The developer goes away, he gets his finance, and he comes back to his design team and says, all right, we have a go, start designing. Right? So these guys are competitively tendered on competitive contracts. The architect is bound by time, the quantity surveyor is bound by time, the project manager, the structural engineer, the mechanical engineer, they're all engaged competitively, usually. So time starts being their priority rather than efficiency of output, of outcomes. And they're all working to this KPI of we've been given a budget, and as long as the building meets the budget, we've met our KPI.
So it's a very disconnected model too.
It is,
in terms of there's no one, it's everyone out for themselves versus.
And it's not intentional, you know what I mean? It's not that they're purposely trying to build, as it's trying to reduce the time and improve their profits. It's that the system has been so structured
For so
that
long.
they know how much time they need to actually design a building, and meet a KPI. It gets even more disjointed than that, right? Because they're all working in their silos. There's a bit of collaboration between the structural engineer and the architect, but the quantity surveyor often can't really start working until the design is finished to a certain point, right? And then they'll come in and provide more advice. And that is basically, have we met the budget KPI? And if they haven't, they have to go back in and redesign that building to remove what's called value engineering, right? It's to find cost savings. They call it value engineering. It's actually value removal, because they don't go in there and find cost savings. What they usually do is reduce the quality of something or remove something completely. So remove the swimming pool or remove a part of the building that they say, right, it was optional anyway. But what they forget about is that KPI was based on a building that did have that. Right, so the value's gone out of it. Right, they keep ending up in that cycle of design to a certain stage. Quantity surveyor comes in and tells you you're either on target or you're not on target. And if you're not on target, you go back into a design loop. You remove value and you continue on again. Right. Eventually, you get through all those design stages, and you have a building that's met the KPI budget. You go in and it's fully designed. You go and you get a contractor and you ask that contractor, right, price the building and go deliver that building, right? That contractor will price the building, they'll deliver the building, and then at the very end of it, the cost of that building will be turned into a cost per square meter, which will be used to help price the next building, right?
Oh, wow.
And it's bad data, because what you're ending up with is continuing less efficiency, less value, because the projects are costing more and more and getting less and less back. And it's all disconnected with data, and it's all bound by time.
It's also that you're ripping out some of the potential beauty in the build as well. Like when you're saying rip out a pool and rip this out, and it's all down to like based on time or budget.
And that's so that's fundamentally it.
It's a bit wild.
It's either your construction cost keeps going up or your value keeps going down. The
Yeah.
value of the build, the value that's intrinsic within the build, and that's, we've an industry, the construction industry it's got higher inflation than 9 out of 10 other industries of the biggest industries globally. And that's not just a New Zealand or Australian problem, that's a problem right around the world. And people say it's material cost or it's labor cost, and there's inflation and all that. Yes, all that exists. But there's also that inbuilt inefficiency in what we're designing, because we're designing to KPIs that are incorrect, and we're not using data, and we're bound by time that doesn't allow us to ask the question, was there a better way of building this that we didn't actually examine?
Alternative.
Inevitably there is. There was a key project that came across our desk, and it was a developer who was designing 5-story apartment blocks. They were building 5 of them. And they came to us and they said, look, we're about ready to go. We fully designed these buildings and we're ready to hit go on it. We're ready to procure a contractor. We're ready to go in for building approval process. But we've seen this legislation that the New Zealand government is bringing out, and it's got our investors a little bit worried, because they're saying we've designed the building that may not necessarily be compliant with future carbon legislation. And it was at that point they said to us, we've got 65 more of these buildings to build over the next 10 years. And our investors are asking us, what are we doing to actually de-risk our project for future legislation, And we said, well, they said, look, we've seen what you guys are doing with this government organisation with their projects. Can you use your software to basically just, as a consultancy, run an analysis and see, or you run an analysis and see if there was a better way of building our building, right? So we ran that analysis, and we were back to them, a couple of days later, and we said to them, listen, look, we ran that analysis, we've tested alternative materials, and what we think is we can actually change the building so that we reduce the weight of your build by 1,000 tons, each of those buildings, and which should have a knock-on effect of reducing the cost of your foundations, because they had big, bulky foundations underneath with bad ground. We've also eliminated 3,750 tons of carbon emissions, which is massive. That's the equivalent of driving around the world 5 or 6 times, and we found you $750,000 of savings. And these were all missed opportunities. And they came back to us and they said, look, we'll go talk to our design team, but how's this possible? How is it that our design teams haven't designed with this in mind, haven't found these opportunities? And again, it's because you didn't tell them. You didn't give them time. You gave them what you wanted to build, and they basically replicated what they designed in the past.
It's almost like you're just doing it like you're in this like autopilot mode, right? And you just...
Yeah, it's an oversimplification of it, because the design process is complicated, and designers are very good at what they do. It's just we're embedded in this, what's the most efficient way to quickly design this building so that it meets a KPI that's wrong, data that's wrong. and we're flying blind to performance until somebody tells us that we haven't performed, So that's all wrong. And going back to the right place at the right time with the right people, it was at that time I hired another junior, straight out of college graduate. He's now my CTO. Again, I keep saying he's our CTO. He's ηezo CTO because it's all three of us are shareholders. Will was, 21 or 22, 23 years old, just qualified and came into the business, and he saw what we were doing on the side of basically with these analyses. And he said, can I be involved in this? And we'd set this up. We'd kind of sidelined a company to just look at this point because we were like, this is quite interesting as a methodology. There may be something in this, but still kind of treating it as a point of difference for our consultancy. And he said, can I be involved in what you're doing there? And we said, well, what can you do? What is it you can do? How can you add value to what we're doing? And he said, well, I'm a qualified quantity surveyor. And we said, we've already got 2 of those. We don't need another 2. What else can you do? And he said, well, I can code a little bit. And we were like, okay, that might be useful. It turned out he was being very humble. He could code a lot. So we basically went, right, well, we've got somebody who can do a little bit of coding. We've got the methodology built for this, and we've got case studies here to show that there's huge missed opportunities right across the industry to get better outcomes. Not just decarbonisation, but finding cost savings, finding weight reductions if you're working with a difficult site.
Yeah.
And we brought this back to this government organisation that we were working with, and we said to them, listen, look, the carbon legislation coming out, you're trying to push a primary industry, and we think there's actually a focal point of the 2 of these together, because what we're finding over and over again is that this primary industry, mass timber, can play a big part in decarbonising our buildings. So it's a hand in glove thing. These 2 things work together. So we said to them, listen, look, we've got the methodology, but we don't have money to build this. But we think it could solve your primary industry issue of unlocking an industry, but also helping the industry decarbonize and prove that decarbonisation is possible. So they said to us, look, we've got a fund. You guys don't perfectly fit it, but we love what you're doing. So let's try and figure out a way to actually get you guys funded to some extent with the fund that they had. They gave us initial funding. One of the developers that we were working with at the time on their building obviously loved what we were doing as well, and they came in as an early angel investor in helping us basically fund the first year or 2 of developing out, moving away from a methodology into an actual software. That was around 2022 or 2023. And we basically prototyped it up, and we gave it to about 10 architects here in New Zealand. And the feedback was really positive. It had a long way to go. There was a lot of things that weren't perfect in it. But it was a good start. That got us all the way to, we didn't raise capital again. We just kept bootstrapping, kept eking out consultancy work as well as this to basically fund the development of the software.
Yeah.
And we've now got it all the way to, it was about 2024, we'd gotten it to the point where it was a minimum viable product that we could actually start charging people for. Right room with the right time. We got noticed by Trimble because of what we were doing with their software, because we were using SketchUp. And they actually flew us across to Las Vegas to present and speak and take part in a competition they were doing for startups in the architectural engineering and construction environment. All expenses paid, stayed in the most incredible hotel in Las Vegas.
What you did on the Strip? Strip? He would have stayed.
Yeah, it was the Venetian Hotel, I think it was called, and it was an amazing experience. It was an incredible experience. But Trimble then were fantastic as well in providing their internal engineers, their internal project managers, their AI specialists to advise us on where we could keep improving. And to this day, they're still in contact with us, helping us out, telling us, giving us feedback and generally just opening doors for us where we need doors opened, because obviously a big industry player, they know a lot of people. We went beyond Trimble and SketchUp and started integrating with Revit and ArchiCAD, the other 2 big ones as well. And we've had some great engagements with those guys as well. And when we were over in Las Vegas, and this felt horrific at the time, but we were in Las Vegas, we were presenting, and there had been a change in government in New Zealand a couple of weeks before we left for Las Vegas. And while we were over there, the government announced that they were shelving all of the climate legislation around the construction industry, which we had built up all of our marketing, all of the way we were speaking at all of our case studies, everything around decarbonisation of the industry. We were ignoring the cost part of it. We were ignoring the weight part of it, the optimization part. We were like, the carbon legislation is going to change the industry, so let's concentrate on that. And suddenly it was all gone. And we were like,
Was this your biggest, do you think this was your biggest uncertain moment? Like in terms of when you just kept going, I know that, like, let's, shit, I hope this works sort of thing. Was this like the biggest
it was
moment?
a holy fuck moment, because we came back and we were like, our market disappeared overnight.
Yeah, and I'm not laughing. It's just like it wasn't I hope this shit works. It's a holy fuck moment because it quite literally, like, you're so used to uncertainty, and then this is a completely different ball game. And then you've also got two younger guys in the team who are probably looking up to you. I could be wrong here, going, Barry, like, what do we do now, sort of thing? Like, thinking about you as like the master, the father of the company, sort of thing. Like, and kind of, or maybe like, who was most? Yeah, how were they amongst it all?
I was definitely the guy who's longest in the industry, but I would also say that the two guys, they're incredible professionals. They don't need to look up to me because they're more than capable themselves. And that was what was amazing about being in the right place with at the right time with the right people, is that these two people walked into what was my existing consultancy and just changed everything, because they were very capable, because they were brilliant thinkers. They didn't, all three of us sat down and we came up with a plan together, right? What do we do from here? It wasn't a case of, Barry, oh shit, what, get us out of this. It was all three of us sitting down and saying, right, equal shareholders in the company, equal decision makers, and let's sit down and come up with a plan, because we need to do something quick. Because
is there a plan at all, Barry, to potentially consider, like with your plans? Were you kind of like scenario planning in terms of, do we just shut shop sort of thing, in terms of, is this going to decimate us as a company? Like, did you have as co-founders that you were like, what would it look like if we were just to pack it all in? Or was it more, you were just even more determined than ever to find a solve for this?
Yeah, look, it's solving a global problem. So we were like, we put all our eggs in one basket of decarbonisation, not really talked about all the other good things we're doing. And the decarbonisation and the overall inefficiency within the industry is a global problem. So our problem isn't, first of all, it's communication. We've communicated this in a way that no longer works. Second of all, New Zealand is the smallest market. It's one of the smallest markets that we will probably ever enter. So it was always going to be a stepping stone to something else, somewhere to test something and then move. So we were like, right, the intention wasn't like, we weren't even fully launched in New Zealand. We were still working with very low numbers and we weren't churning over a lot of revenue. So it was like, right, well, what we've got to do is effectively change our beachhead. And we've got to change the way we communicate this. Now, at the time, we didn't know. At that time, we hadn't come to the realization that the communication was part of the problem. It was a brilliant organization that came into our lives that actually looked at that for us. And I do want to give them a shout out in a moment. Yeah, there was never a no shit moment. We've got to shut this down and go back to consultancy. I don't think any of the three of us could have faced going back to consultancy. We had been so fired up and so energized by what we were doing that all three of us to this day would say that we just never ever want to go back to consultancy and do that again.
Energy is everything, right? But energy is like, follow your energy, like it's everything.
So the organisation that helped us out with the communication was an accelerator here in New Zealand called the Aurora Climate Lab, as part of it's part of an organisation in Wellington, absolutely incredible startup ecosphere. They interviewed us as to join their accelerator, and they basically said, you guys seem to be smashing it, you don't need us. And we went, we have a major problem. Our market has disappeared, And they obviously twigged with them because they said, okay, join the accelerator. And we were one of 12 companies that joined the accelerator that year. And they put us with incredible professionals that looked at everything we'd been doing and basically came back and said, one was a sustainability professional. They came back and they said, you're communicating this all wrong because you're not communicating the value of sustainability. You're just communicating decarbonize or else. A big stick, You're going to spend all this time trying to decarbonize your buildings. You're going to spend all this time trying to report on it. You guys fix that. That's great. But it's a big stick that you're hitting your customers with. What you actually need to do is have the LED light bulb moment, which is basically the LED light bulb has become synonymous with sustainability.
Yeah.
Because it works from a financial perspective. They last longer, they're cheaper to make, they're cheaper to run, and they're good for the environment.
Yeah.
So you guys need to start thinking, because that's exactly what you do. You're showing developers where the missed opportunities are to decarbonize. find cost savings, or to find weight reductions. And we've got other data sets now as well that we look at, but you're finding the opportunities where they can actually do better and actually afford to be able to do better.
Yeah. It's a different value exchange too, isn't it? Like in terms of just from a communication perspective and the way you work with your partners as well. Like
Yeah.
it's a
And
very,
that's
yeah.
one of the big things is that big change for me and that big uncertainty for me was I went from being a director in a consultancy that was managing projects, managing workloads, putting structure in place, to suddenly no longer doing that, but being a CEO of a startup company that I knew nothing about, an industry that I knew nothing about. I knew the methodology that we were building, but I had no idea of what insurances we needed, who we needed to speak to, how did we actually open doors, how do you market, how do you do social media? Because as a consultancy, we never had to do any of that. Consultancy, you worked with your clients that were existing clients, and you incrementally built them out. This was so like we'd no clients, we'd no marketing, we'd no communication that was any good, and it was basically right. You're now CEO, you've got to figure all this shit out.
So how it's like in terms of that, like, and I think it's a good one for the listeners, right? Like as a founder and CEO, and you're coming into like complete unknown, and you're like, where the hell do I even start, sort of thing. And you've talked around, your tribe and how important that is, from your co-founders through to Tremble and the other company in New Zealand. It's not that I've forgotten their name. I just don't think I can pronounce it the way you pronounced it, the accelerator in New Zealand. It's really important, right? Because there's so much, I think, as a founder, you just have to teach yourself. Like it comes back to this mastery piece and just throwing yourself into it. Like, when you don't know how to do social and you don't know how to do this, like, there's a way you can cut corners. There's also a way just to learn it yourself. And for me, I'm a big fan of understanding it, because once you understand it, or just getting curious and digging into it, asking questions, etc., even if you can just understand the fundamentals, it's then bringing in the right people, or, so that you just still understand what you're not just handing something over, right? And it kind of probably is, maybe it's something to explore a little bit in terms of even from a bootstrapping to investor perspective. It's not like you're handing over all your equity. You're still having some, like, it's control. It's also just knowing, being in the business across it as well as sitting above it. And I think that's just so important, because I think a lot of times you see startups or founders where they're just like, well, I don't know how to do this. So, like a lot of people, currently I'm hearing this whole cognitive offloading with AI, right? So you offload it to others, and then you can get yourself into trouble in terms of, oh shit, I don't know. Like, I don't know anything about this part of my business. How did we get here? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's your view on that?
I think you have to figure shit out.
Yeah.
As in, like, you can't, like, you have to have the basics yourself to even know what questions you need to ask.
Yeah.
When we started this, officially back in 2022, there was, or at least we weren't aware of any chat GPT that you could ask questions to, you know what I mean? So you quite literally had to go ask your accountant. And somebody said it at the time, actually. They said, as a startup founder, you're going to have to get comfortable asking people to do things they shouldn't have to do for you.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, just get comfortable with being uncomfortable and asking uncomfortable questions, and asking them to do stuff that they just really shouldn't be doing for you at all, So going to your accountant and just, bending their ear for, dropping them with a coffee and asking them a million questions, it's same, speaking to government organizations, just again, turning up at their office, just randomly turning up at their office or asking for meetings that you shouldn't be getting, you have to get uncomfortable asking those questions and getting into rooms that you shouldn't be in, and just keep pushing yourself.
Is it that you shouldn't be in those rooms, Barry, or is it more that that's the imposter syndrome that's happening, where everyone's equal? It's not that you shouldn't be in them. It's just that you don't believe that you should be in them, when actually you have every right to be in them, because you have a great solution for them. And I think, because I do often think, and even from my own perspective and limiting beliefs at times as a founder, and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be talking to someone like yourself on my pod, for example, because look at this person. He's like, I have no idea when it comes to construction and data and everything you're talking about. However, I do feel like I am, like, I have a right to talk to you because I understand business, right? So I may not understand the intricacies of it as such. So I think that we quite often, sometimes, I'm just using that as an example, I just think quite often sometimes we we say we shouldn't be in this room or we shouldn't do this or we shouldn't do that when it's actually no, I need to be. So it's how do I get myself into that room? Because I think also from a like bettering yourself, the more you put yourself into those unknown situations, the better you become. You become a better person, a better operator, a better business. Do you know what I mean? Like I just
Yes, yeah, 100%. And imposter syndrome, I completely get that. That's something that I've, in times of my career, I've definitely felt like I've had that, you know. And you are right. You should be in every room that you're an expert in. You know what I mean? And even in
yes.
rooms that you're not an expert in,
Yeah.
because you've got something to add anyway. There's often a feeling, I think, especially with government organisations, that you're not welcome.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm saying is, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, by forcing a
Mm.
sen- forcing a line of questions or forcing a meeting, and pestering people until they actually answer your question, because there's so many across all industries that will just ignore you for no good reason.
How just on that, and especially for the listeners, in terms of pestering, like, when it comes to, when you've got no clients or you're on the hunt for clients and you're just getting this no, 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 no. And I did write it down around rejection at times and what that feels like. What's your view as in terms of how much do you pester? Like when you've, for example, submitted a proposal or you've reached out to somebody and they've said, yeah, let's catch up, let's have a meeting. Do you have a rule, like, in terms of is it, like, 3, 4 times I could like, what's your because there's the other part of just not also being desperate and not being, respect your own worth as well in terms of
Yeah.
you know
What
what
I
I mean?
would say is, like, I've no number, because I would keep going until I got the meeting that I wanted. But the key to me is being authentic.
Yes.
Right, if you're starting to spam them with cold emails and information they don't need, or you're not actually understanding their perspective, well, then it just doesn't. It's never going to land, And you can keep sending that email, and you can keep, sending that text message or phone call, or trying to make that phone call. But unless there's an authentic understanding of where they're sitting,
Yeah.
you just won't get that meeting or phone call. So you do have to understand their side and understand what they're looking for and what's in it for them, and then lead with that. And what we find that when you lead, when there's something in it for them, some way you can help them, you're far more likely to get a response.
Yeah. I've got a couple of final questions for you. What is it that with co-founders, a team of 3, what is it that, I should say a team of 3, but co-founders of 3 of you, right? What's your magic? What's your chemistry? What keeps you guys in flow? And when I mean in flow, like, like everything is just in sync, it's effortless, you're focused, you're like, what is it? What keeps you guys? Because you've got, you brought in a couple of younger players, and I'm not saying you're old at all. It's just like, the generations, like, I'm 48, you talk to the younger generations and they've got ideas, you've got different ideas at times. Like, and especially as when it's a trio as well.
Yeah. It was it was the Aurora Climate Lab. They gave us this exercise. They said, look, you need to go into a room with your 3 co-founders. And we'd never done this, and we'd known, it's like part of your business plan. You all sit down, you come up with a business plan. Yeah. And we never actually saw the value in, like, we had a business plan, you know what I mean? But we never saw the value in the kind of periphery parts of it. Like, what are your company values? Those kind of things. We never actually sat down and ever sat down and discussed them or gone away and thought about them. Yeah. It felt fluffy. It felt like marketing. It felt like something you put on your website. And it was the Aurora Climate Lab said to us, you have to do this. You have to. You have to sit down, and the 3 of you guys come up with your company values. You know what I mean? Go away and do it. And they gave us a framework to go do it. And what we found was that all 3 of us went away. We went all home, and we all sat down. And 24 hours later, we came back with a schedule of. You listed off. You wrote down every word that came into your head that was a value that was personal to you, not necessarily your company, but personal to you. And then you sat down and you went through all of those together and actually tried to qualify, right, well, which ones are common to all of us, which 3 keep hitting on all of us, and actually talking about them, why they're a value for you. And I think up until that, you definitely had some stressful moments, and I would say that it's never ever been easy. We all get along and we all work really together, but I would definitely say it's never been easy. But I think that exercise of sitting down and actually understanding each other's values, because it wasn't an opportunity to just discuss what was common to all of us and what was going to be our business values. It was, you suddenly got insights into the lives of the others, because you're not talking about 3 or 4 or 5 values, you're talking about 50 or 60 values, that are everybody's adding to, discussing those. And I think just you get that insight. We also, one of the other things we do is we make sure that we sit down every single week.
Yes.
So we're in different locations. So we make sure that all 3 of us sit down together, and it starts with, I can't remember what this is called. There's a framework again, and the Aurora Climate Lab gave it to us, where you sit down and you go through, each one of you has a win for the week. Doesn't matter how big or small it is, and you go through what that win is. Each of you has something you learned that week, and all 3 of you go through what you actually learned and share that knowledge. You then go into who you want to thank. So whether it's each other or
I love that.
everybody,
I haven't heard that one. Who you want to thank?
yeah. And then what you're going to do different next week. So all 3 of you, what's the one thing you're going to do different next week, and then what are the priorities for you next week?
Yeah, it's good.
When you evolve that once a week, you find that conversation widens and widens and widens beyond those key questions into conversations that actually needle out things that you probably might have been keeping to yourself, not necessarily discussing or not thinking it was important, because it becomes very conversational.
It's so important. Yeah, that is. And I just I'm constantly talking to founders that I work with that are scaling, and I'm like, have you had a strategy meeting this week? And they're like, oh, we didn't get to us. Like, anyone there? Like, how is that serving you? How is it serving the business? How is it serving the team? If the strategy meeting or the founder meeting, I call it strategy because it is strategic. Like, it's strategic about yourself. It's strategic about the business, the team, etc. It's a non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. Like, it just has to happen. And if you can't prioritize that, something fundamentally wrong in the business, and something is not working that is causing you to not be able to have that meeting.
Yep. Well, we were very skeptical of it initially. We had a mentor that was sitting with us, and they would sit in the room and actually encourage the 3 of us to actually go through those questions, and we used to go away every week kind of going, that's a bit pointless. You know what I mean? It's a waste of time. We've better things to be talking about.
I can imagine you doing that too. You'd be like, you'd be hard work. You'd be like, what's the point in this? Like, let's just get on with it, sort of thing. I can see you're
Let's talk about the real problems. We're now 14, 15 months after that accelerator, and nobody questions it. We go into it every single Friday over a cup of coffee, virtually, and we all speak to each other. And as I said, you just get to say the things and carry the tone that you actually mean, as opposed to just corresponding over chat or emails or the odd phone call here and there. You just needle out the things that need to be actually said.
Yeah. It's like, and it's also life leadership and business conversation, like when you might have something happening personally or whatever. Okay, we have been talking for 50 minutes. We've been in a full flow state. Final question for you. I'm going to bring it back to shit. I hope this works. What advice would you give any founder or anyone starting their own company or scaling in a moment of shit? I hope this works. What would be your one piece of advice from your own lived experience that you would give to them in that very moment when you've sat in it? And even if have you had any recently, or is it just more like, no?
Yeah. It's a great question. I would say that I've definitely doubted at times whether this was going to move forward. We were always determined to move it forward, but you do every so often have like a period where you go, it didn't go as well as it should have done, and things don't feel great. Talk to somebody who's external to it. My own brother, I remember at one point a couple of months back where I was like, shit, man, you know what, I'm just going to go get a corporate job, and it was a moment of weakness, I mean, it was a moment of weakness. I was like, I need something that's less stressful, something that's easier to do, something where I could just earn a 9 to 5. Yeah. And he was like, no, stay the course. Don't be
that's what I get told. You're in. What did someone said to me recently when I was having a breakdown moment? It's quite a few weeks ago. I was crying, and I was just like, they were like, you're in Death Valley, B. Just keep going. Oh, and then I've got a business mentor that says to me quite often, have you applied for any corporate jobs lately? And he giggles. He's just like, don't. And I just laugh at him now, because there is, once you're in it. And do you know what? At the end of the day, I think as a final note, before we find out all your details, Barry, and how to get in contact with you is, I think here's the thing, right? Nothing is certain. Everything is uncertain. We're living in the unknown. It's the ability to be exactly like you and your co-founders, the fearless, have that courage, be brave, clear communication. And if it doesn't work, one day tomorrow is a new day and it will work differently tomorrow. So I think and I have to remind myself of that all the time. So Barry, on that note, I've loved this conversation. I knew it would be a good one. It's been a good one. So thank you so much. How do we find out more about ηezo? How do we find out more about you? Awesome.
Is where you'll find out everything you need to find out about us. There's a contact page on there. If you're an architect and engineer watching this, there's a free trial on there. So if you want to jump on and actually just use the software, you can do.
For anyone listening out there, take the free trial. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. Thanks, Barry. I'm going to let you get back to your afternoon. Thank you. Take care.
Cheers. Thanks, B.
Thanks.